and the Ant-Man is directed by Peyton Reed, and it is the sequel to Ant-Man, which came out in 2015. It is the 20th, I think, or 21st film in the MCU. Yes, you heard correctly, and yes, the title of the video is what it is. I apologize for nothing. You'll find out what I mean in a little bit. The same cast and crew from the original Ant-Man is back for this one. Paul Rudd once again returns as the co-star of this movie, Ant-Man. Evangeline Lilly gets a bigger role this time as Wasp. Hank Pym is played by Michael Douglas. You also have Michael Pena and T.I. returning in supporting roles, along with that Russian guy that I can't really remember his name, but he's a part of their crew for some reason. So Wasp and the Ant-Man takes place, I feel like, a couple of years after Civil War, which is also the last time that we saw Ant-Man himself. Since the events of Civil War, Scott Lang, who obviously broke the law when he participated in the events of Civil War, has been stuck on house arrest. Evangeline Lilly and her father, Hank Pym, have been on the run, because they gave him the technology and allowed him to do it. Hank Pym and his daughter are trying to find a way into the quantum realm. The quantum realm is basically this place that exists when you go subatomic. Subatomic is basically when you shrink between the molecules of things and you basically become smaller than, everything that ever existed. Scott was in the quantum realm in the first film, but then he escaped, so they think, hey, if he escaped, maybe the original Wasp, Hank Pym's wife, is still alive. Father and daughter set out on a mission to acquire some technology so that they can go to the quantum realm so that they can bring their mother and his wife back. They recruit Scott because Scott, again, is the only guy that's been there, so they feel like they need his help in order to do this. There's also a villain that pops up named Ghost who wants their technology for her own reasons. And there you go, it's an Ant-Man sequel, although it's more of a Wasp movie, but Ant-Man sequel. One of the things I give this movie credit for, as well as the first film, is that the action sequences are really inventive, really creative. Since you're dealing with characters who can shrink at the drop of a dime, who can grow big again, who can weave in and out of a battle in really interesting ways, it allows you to create some really innovative and exciting action and fight sequences. Just like the first one, this film constantly had me entertained when shit was going down, when the Wasp and the Ant-Man were throwing down, or when there were car chases, shootouts, stuff like that. I give Peyton Reed a lot of credit for the way that he directed these sequences. It's really entertaining stuff. Evangeline Lilly gets a much bigger role, a much more emotional role this time around. She is pretty much the star of the movie, which is weird because her name is in the title, but it doesn't matter. Like I said, this is Wasp and the Ant-Man. So Evangeline Lilly not only gets to grace us with her fine-ass presence, but she also gets to lay down the smackdown on anybody who steps in her way. It was great to see the frustration that she built up in the first film from not being able to be a hero because her father was overprotective, to then transition into the second film where we see her kicking ass and taking names because she's the goddamn Wasp. The dynamic between her and between Scott and between Hank Pym is the best thing about this movie, just like it was my favorite thing about the first film. They all bounce off of each other really well. They have really great and funny interactions. They have great chemistry. The chemistry between the Wasp and Ant-Man is even better, I feel like, this time around. I mean, in the first film, they kind of had this sexual tension thing that was building up where you could tell they wanted to bang each other, but they just didn't want to admit it, so we wait till the end of the film. And in this film, it feels like Scott is more like an ex-boyfriend who messed up, and so she's kind of upset at him, but then again, you can tell that they still have the feels for each other, kind of just winking and flirting and going back and forth the whole movie, and then you can tell that sometimes when they look at each other, they want to stuff each other's burritos. Wow, that's a very colorful image. I'm not really sure why my mind went to there, but the imagery is hitting me, and it is... whew. Just like the first film, the funniest thing about this movie is Louise. He doesn't get as much to do as he did in the first film, in my humble opinion. He definitely has some of the funniest moments. In fact, I feel like when I die, I want somebody like Louise to speak at my funeral. I just want him to recap. I want him to say stuff about me. I want him to say stuff about me that people should know. Because this guy and his recaps and his stories, man, it's comedic gold. After credit scene, in all honesty, you could probably skip that one. That one's kind of pointless. It's useless. It's just a gag of something that's not even that funny. The mid-credit scene, wow, that one was, not gonna lie, that was pretty awesome. Comedy appeals to all of us in different ways. We're all cut from a different womb. Once again, the imagery that is coming out of my mouth in this video is just, wow. Either way, you get what I'm saying. People laugh at different shit because we're different people. And even though I feel like most people are going to laugh at most of the jokes and the gags in this film, I'll be honest, I didn't really laugh that much during this movie. In particular, I feel like they do that thing that some Marvel movies do, where they compromise the tone of the moment for a bunch of unnecessary jokes. And all I'm saying is, if you're gonna throw some unnecessary jokes into a moment that doesn't need it, at least make the unnecessary jokes funny. And I don't feel like this film did that as much. The villain, Ghost, I forget the chick who plays Ghost. Listen, her backstory is actually more interesting than she is as a villain. Her backstory is admittedly intriguing, but after that, she ceases to become an interesting character at all, and she's pretty much just there for plot, and she's there because the movie needs a bad guy, I guess. Speaking of bad guys, there's also another bad guy played by Walter Goggins, which... why was he in this movie? I actually have no idea why Walter Goggins and his subplot is in this movie. I mean, I get the why of it because it sets up a couple of plot points, but honestly, it feels like a huge time waster. And the biggest strength of this movie is also, I think, one of its biggest weaknesses. The movie is trying to call itself Ant-Man and the Wasp, but again, it feels much more like a Wasp movie than an Ant-Man movie. Scott Lang feels kind of nerfed in this movie. He feels kind of like he's the bumbling sidekick. It feels like he's just running around the whole movie accidentally causing things to happen and kind of just being a screw-up. In contrast to him, the Wasp is just oh so badass and oh so amazing, and you love the Wasp and you root for the Wasp, and I'm not complaining about the Wasp, I'm just saying it feels weird to call the movie Ant-Man and the Wasp when the Wasp is really who the story centers around. There are some things that happen towards the end of this film where I wish they had explained things a little bit, where I'm just kind of sitting there in the theater, I'm like, oh, so we're not even going to explain it, we're just going to do a thing, and okay, well, I mean, sure, if you want to. I'm going to be thinking about this, and I'm going to mention it in my review tomorrow, so it would have helped. Wasp and the Ant-Man is a pretty fun, enjoyable movie. It's got good action, it's got good humor. I had to step back from the movie and ask myself, honestly, if this wasn't a Marvel movie, would I really care that much about it? And the answer is, nah, I probably wouldn't. Wasp and the Ant-Man is kind of average as a film overall, and so I'm going to put it in the Fortress of Solitude. Please like and subscribe to the Superfan Show, and as always, if you like what you see, tell me how you feel, and stay tuned to hear more from the Man of Steel. Peace!